More calls for public housing. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here with my stein of coffee powering me through the day, and I thought we'd have a look at this this ABC News article discussing another call or more calls for public housing. Everyone is calling for public housing. I think I'm the only architect that publicly dares to say we maybe shouldn't be building more public housing. You know, we've got this home builder grant, the home builder grant, $25,000. Okay, now the home builder grant can have better impact on the economy than putting that same money into public housing, into social housing. I'll explain it to you. For every 25 grand the government hands out, there's a minimum of $150,000 that us plebs need to put in to get access to that free money. So that means every $25,000, in fact, creates $175,000 of economic activity. Then you flow that money through the washing machine of the economy of a few times, and it creates more jobs, creates more stimulus, keeps more people out of poverty and out of destitution. Now, if you take that same 25 grand from the government and put it in public housing, you get a $25,000 impact because there's no personal investment coming in as well. There's no money that we have to front up to get access to it. And you're not going to have private owners, pushing for efficient use of the money as much as when you have public projects. So that's why, there's a whole feel-good factor of public housing. Feel-good factor. Keep the, everyone deserves a home. Well, that's an ideological position that we need to argue about. There's a sense of entitlement there. I mean, we should be a civilization where everyone can aspire to own a home at a very reasonable level. But yeah, I would rather, personally, we look at ways to stimulate the economy which will ensure less people need to depend on government support. Because do you really want to live in a house where the, government can march up and lock you all down and essentially weld you into your little government box? I know I wouldn't. And we've seen that happen in Victoria, guys. So it ain't a fantasy. We're living in bloody, Judge Dredd world. So let's have a look. The nation's largest community housing advocacy group is urging, they've got a complete conflict of interest there. This is the problem with all of these advocacy groups and these charities. They've got a conflict of interest, particularly if they take money from the government. Is urging the government to invest more in more social housing, not only to help those in need get a roof over their head, but also as a major boost to the economy during the recession. And I've just explained to you why this is not the smartest way for government to spend money. You're not going to get the same impact. Power Housing's research provided to 730 revealed that housing construction could drop by as much as 50% from its recent peak in 2018. It's already dropping. This could see thousands of tradies and contractors without work. That's a lot of jobs, Nicholas Proud, Power Housing Chief Executive, said. That's a lot of people who won't be getting called to quote on doing the plumbing or the plastering or the carpentry. See, they're framing it to create an emotional narrative to kind of manipulate you to support these socialist policies, when I just explained other interventions can have a greater impact. It's called maths. I mean, do we do that anymore? I know our education's dropped down, guys. I know our education's dropped down. I mean, I just see it on LinkedIn every bloody architect. Oh, social housing, social housing. I think I'm in one of the leftiest professions in the world, to be honest. We get so much greenwashing at university. Oh, I'm amazed. Because, I mean, for me, we did subjects where they were essentially greenwashing us. And, and very socialist tangent. And it felt like some of these lectures were sermons. And I still managed to get like HDs in these subjects. Because I ended up going down a path completely red-pilling myself about how much bullshit they were putting forward. I'm going, well, actually, this argument you're making about environmental impact, look at this evidence. It's not true. It's not correct. You're creating more embodied, your carbon footprint is going to be higher than if you were to implement, say a nuclear power plant. You just need to look at a different time span and change your perspective. So, so that was the good thing. You could make a counter-argument. In architecture, you could make a counter-argument to a proposition put forward to you if you had sufficient evidence to justify it. And that's what I really enjoyed about it, to be honest. But then, when I was called back like a year later to tutor the subject, the youngies wouldn't do that. They would just follow the line. They were following what they were taught. So I know there's all these people going, oh, universities are just brainwashing places, and I'm sure they are. I mean, architecture is a course where you're meant to present and dialogue and discuss. Well, hopefully it hasn't changed from that, and I suspect it actually is. There's some people that want to remove the critiques, because you need to put your work up, and you've got a panel of professionals sitting in front of you tearing it to pieces. So you build the thick skin. But the point is, when I went back there, a lot of the new people wouldn't challenge what was put in front of them. They just blindly accepted. Then I actually got depressed. I couldn't teach that subject. I had to get out of it. And maybe that's just the sign of where things are heading. So, back to this. Every newly built house has about 43 trades and sub-trades that get gainfully employed. Yep, that's right. It's not just trades, but material suppliers too. He said 5,000 bricks are used in the average home. Exactly, and you're going to get more of this happening if you have systems to encourage the private citizens to up their money. So, I mean, we can argue about the benefits, or if it's ethical for the state to be, intervening in the market. Personally, I'd prefer they wouldn't, but I see that as more of an idealistic position to put forward to at least advocate for some critical thinking of these interventions the government's doing. I see very little political will in Australia for less dependence on the state. That's just how I see it. Let me know what you think. But everything they're saying here is right. But it can be just imagine that if we don't waste this money on these public projects and use it to stimulate private projects, you'll get even a greater impact. And then we combine that maybe with some tax deductions. Tradies, why don't we reduce petrol? There you go. Or we subsidize what is it? The Chico roll vans with the girls coming on site. There we go. I'm being facetious there. So the small economies around the country that rely on homes being built are very much understated, he said. Not really. From high fly to I need help. So, Mike Smith was once a federal government media advisor. I'm the last person you'd expect to see in social housing, he said. I owned a property on an island in the Whitsundays. I owned a house on several acres in central Victoria and apartments in Melbourne, sports cars and a share portfolio. What happened? Let's see. What do you think happened, guys? Do you think he was over-leveraged, or do you think he's now in the MGTOW band? What do you reckon? I'll have a shot of coffee and you let me know in the comments. But, he worked for the government. He's never had a real job. The 54-year-old had his own private consulting firm, earning between $10,000 to $15,000 a week before he came undone due to debt, drugs, and alcohol. Oh, bloody hell. Well, there you go, mate. There I was with the employment minister and the Howard government launching the jobs network, he said. Then years later, I was lining up in the queue at Centrelink. I felt so ashamed, I felt like a failure. Bloody hell, mate, yeah. I mean, that's going to be a huge hit. That's going to be a huge hit. And that's what these things can do to you. And he's probably under a lot of stress, working an insane amount. And I've seen it, in the legal profession. Yeah, drugs are rampant. Even in construction, drugs are rampant. It's terrible. And that's why I'd argue sometimes it's better to just take a step back and not earn as much and live a better life. He now lives in subsidized community housing in Canberra. Fighting back tears, he described getting the keys. For the first time, it felt like someone or something believed in me, and I was worth another go, he said. It feels like home. It feels like home. He predicts the pandemic... Yeah, I mean, okay, this is a very emotive one. He's down on his luck and he got a public housing. Yeah, back in the day, the religious organizations would have done the same thing. You don't need the state to provide charity. There are other groups that provide charity as well, but it's ABC, of course, so they don't exist. It has to be the state to take care of us, guys. And it's just the mindset of these people. They're usually the least generous, too, by the way. I think a lot of people are starting to realize that community support, financial support and housing is critical because anything can happen. Well, maybe if he didn't become a bloody drug-fueled alcoholic and didn't piss away all his money, then he wouldn't be dependent on the state. I mean, is that victim blaming I'm doing again, guys? We've all been through hard times. We've all made stupid mistakes. You've got to build up. You've got to build up again. And it's tough. It's tough. It's part of life. A lot of people are we're going to hear this story again and again, everyone. A lot of people are going to have some tough times. We looked at a previous video where someone close to my age just suddenly quit their job and thought they could find another one instantly, just as everything was happening in January, of all things. Even before the pandemic recession, 200,000 Australians were waiting for social housing, according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. This is public housing provided by government or community housing provided by an NGO at subsidised rates, 75 to 80% of market rent rates or 25% of a person's income. The housing is the founding block of someone's life, Mr. Proud said. I've been to some housing here in Queensland. Right in the city, we visited a lady's house, and it was set up for homeless people, had security, and I was just amazed at the quality that they were getting. I was amazed at the quality that they were getting. When I think public housing, when I think emergency accommodation, I think the Salvation Army hundreds of years ago. You couldn't get away with that now. They wouldn't allow you to house a whole lot of people in a warehouse, keep them off the streets. You know, it's the regulations are too tough, and that's why it costs so much. There are now calls for the federal government to stimulate the economy through building more social housing to help slow a massive predicted drop-off in construction. You know, Federal Housing Minister Michael Sukkar said the government has already announced a $680 million home builder program to give cash grants for new home builds or renovations. People are going, oh, it's only going to rich people. Yes, that's the point, to get more economic activity so you keep people out of social housing. You don't want them to have to depend on social housing. And how many people who are advocating for this have actually lived near social housing? Because it can be terrible living near social housing. You know, we've got one up the street. I know where it is because I've done title searches. And we had, you know, previous occupants. You know, drugs, smashing bottles up the streets, all this other rubbish. You know. Although the delivery and construction of social housing is a responsibility of state and territory governments, the Morrison government is making significant ongoing investment into social housing, he said in a statement to 7:30. Housing industry analyst Tim Lawless of CoreLogic said more could be done. When you look at the whole multiplier effect of construction, it also means there's less investment in the marketplace and there are less retail items being purchased and so forth. There is a demonstrated need to really start establishing more public housing in the sector. Well, maybe we need to look at ways of reducing the burden of the state on people. Getting housing cheaper. Of course, we're seeing the Home Builders Grant, which has some fairly strict eligibility requirements, which probably means it's not going to be as effective as some of the other policies we've seen in the past. There is a demonstrated demand in that sector and an absolute underbuild or underservicing for those who are less than advantaged. Well, the problem is, fundamentally, it comes back to you've got a whole lot of foreign investment, which is driving up property. You've got negative gearing, which is driving up the demand for property as a way of mitigating the tax burden people have to pay. So it's this horrific feedback loop. You've got the situation where there's no incentive to create these houses, so the government has to step in, tax the shit out of us to pay for this stuff. And then people, to get out of paying the tax, buy more houses, which they're negative gear, where they're competing with foreigners as well, which drives up the cost, which drives more people to social housing, which drives up more taxation, which means more people are encouraged to negative gear. Can you see what's going on here? Maybe we need some taxation reform to address these issues in the longer term, because this is just going to be advocacy groups trying to get a bigger slice of the pie. The majority of social housing residents are women and low-paid workers, like Marlene Dankar. I work as a medical receptionist. I've been there almost 10 years now, she said. I work hard, but I don't earn enough money for me to go and rent a market property. She and her 14-year-old son have moved into a community housing subsidised unit in a block of flats in Sydney's west. Before that, they were struggling in a granny flat. Oh, come on. It was too small for a growing teenager, she said. When I walked into this unit, I said, wow, look at it now. It's amazing. It's something I couldn't believe. And when she gave me the keys and said, this is your home, I had tears in my eyes. I was crying. This is more emotional crap. I don't care. I don't care. Okay. So, well, there you go, guys. Am I just too much of a cold-hearted bastard that thinks of the big picture and I'm not getting manipulated by this stuff? You know, what do you think, guys? Should we just build houses for everyone? Houses are a right. People don't need to work for shit anymore. You know, They're a right. No, they're not. Nothing's a right. That's the thing. What do you think, guys? Let me know in the comments. I haven't had breakfast. Maybe I'm just too grumpy. Maybe I'm just too grumpy. As always, thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and want to support the content I create, there are a few ways you can. You can join us on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us using our affiliate links at Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or Kucoin. You can buy a merch from HeiseSays. You can support us using PayPal, Gold Pass, or by PayPal, which I've already said. See you. Take care.